The year is 2022. The place is Grasse, France. A room that smells of thyme and flowers. Sunlight cuts through old glass. It lands on a long table. On the table are small glass vials, dozens of them. Each one holds a clear, precious oil. Each one is a different shade of pale gold. This is the heart of a global perfume house. A man named Jean-Pierre Renaud sits at the table. He is what they call a nose. His entire life is in these vials. He can smell the difference between rain on dirt in June and rain on dirt in July. He is smelling lavender today. Samples from all over the world: Bulgaria, China, the English countryside. He lifts a vial. He dips a thin paper strip. He brings it to his nose, closes his eyes. He shakes his head. Too much camphor, too medicinal. Another vial, another strip. Too weak, faded, like a memory of a flower, not the flower itself. He does this for an hour. His assistant watches, silent. This is a ritual. Then he picks up the last vial. It is labeled simply, Finch Hollow Farm, Oregon, USA. He dips the strip. He raises it. He breathes in. And Jean-Pierre Renaud, a man who has smelled 10,000 fields, goes perfectly still. His eyes do not open. His hand does not move. The assistant leans forward. Is something wrong? The silence stretches. 1 second. 5. 10. Then Jean-Pierre opens his eyes. He looks at the paper strip as if it is a ghost. He says one word: impossible. He brings it to his nose again, a long, slow inhalation. He can smell the volcanic soil. He can smell the cool nights and the hot days. A note of honey, a hint of wild mint, a sweetness he has not smelled since his grandfather's fields were plowed under for apartments 50 years ago. He looks at the lab report next to the vial. The numbers do not make sense. The percentage of linylyl acetate is higher than the theoretical maximum. The camphor is almost non-existent. This is not lavender. This is an idea of lavender, the perfect form of it. He looks at his assistant. His voice is quiet, reverent. Get me everything they have. Everything. Pay them what they ask. I want every drop from this Finch Hollow farm. The assistant nods, already typing on his phone. He pulls up the file on the farm. A small operation, 50 acres, family-owned for a century. The farmer's name is Alara Finch. And then the assistant stops. He finds something else in the digital file. An old document, scanned years ago as part of an agricultural archive project. A letter, dated October 12, 1978, from the Willamette Valley Farmers Cooperative, addressed to a Miss Alara Finch. He reads a single line from the letter, and he looks up at Jean-Pierre. He says, "You are not going to believe this." The letter said her crop was a weed, a decorative, unwanted, unmarketable weed. This is the story of the 44 years between that letter and this moment. It's the story of a woman who was told her life's work was worthless by a good man, a kind man, who was absolutely, completely, and devastatingly wrong. These are the stories we tell on this channel. The stories of people who were counted out, who were told no, who quietly went to work and built their own yes. If those are the stories you need to hear, subscribe, because the world is full of people who will tell you what you can't do. We're here to show you what happens when you don't listen. Let's go back to 1978, to a dusty office in a metal-sided building. The air smells of diesel and fertilizer and damp earth. This is the Willamette Valley Farmers Co-op, the center of the universe for 1,000 farms. Ilara Finch sits in a chair across from the manager. His name is Dale Abernathy. Dale is a good man. Everyone in the valley knows it. He coaches Little League. He serves on the church board. He has helped more farmers through tough times than anyone can count. His handshake is a contract. His word is bond. And right now, his face is full of genuine concern. Ilara is 24 years old. Her father had died that spring, a heart that just gave out in the middle of a row of hazelnuts. He left her the farm, 120 acres, and a mountain of debt. The bankers had been kind, but clear. She had until next year's harvest to turn a profit, or the farm her great-grandfather had cleared with his own 2 hands would be sold. She had spent the summer thinking, praying. The price of grass seed was in the basement. Hazelnuts were a decade away from paying for themselves. Wheat was a losing game against the big farms in the Midwest. She couldn't win their game, so she had decided not to play it. She had taken 20 acres, the rockiest, sunniest, south-facing slope that was worst for everything else, and she had planted lavender. Thousands of tiny, gray-green starts. She'd done the research, read old books from the library, written letters to growers in France. She believed it could work. The soil was right. The climate was right. Now the first harvest was in. She had brought a sample to Dale Abernathy, a small burlap sack filled with fragrant purple buds. It sits on his desk between them, filling the office with a scent no one has ever smelled in this building before. Dale sighs. He picks up the sack. He rubs a few buds between his thick fingers. He smells them. He is a man who knows the smell of money, and this to him does not smell like money. It smells like his wife's garden. It smells like soap. Ilara, he says. His voice is gentle, paternal. I've known you since you were a little girl. I knew your father my whole life. I'm not going to be the man who encourages you down a dead-end road. Ilara waits. She knows what's coming. This isn't a crop, he says, gesturing at the sack. This is a hobby. It's a decorative plant. What am I supposed to do with it? I can't run it through the combine. The oil would gum up the works. There's no market code for it. There's no futures contract for it. Who is going to buy it? She has an answer. She has a list of small soap makers, herbalists, potpourri companies. She slides the paper across the desk. Dale glances at it. He sees the small orders, 50 pounds here, 100 there. He shakes his head. This is pocket money, Ilara. This won't pay the note at the bank. This won't keep the lights on. You need a commodity crop, something we can move by the truckload. She looks at him. Her hands are clasped in her lap, knuckles white. Dale, I can't compete on wheat. I don't have the acreage. I don't have the equipment. This is something I can do, something different. He leans forward, and this is the part that mattered, the part that would stick in her memory like a burr. He wasn't angry. He wasn't dismissive. He was kind. His certainty was wrapped in a blanket of genuine care, and that made it so much worse. I am trying to protect you, he says. I am trying to help you keep your father's farm. If you plow this under right now, you can still get a winter wheat crop in. We'll float you the seed. You can pay us back after harvest. It's the safe bet. It's the only bet. She feels the walls of the office closing in, the weight of his reason, the logic of the entire valley, the history of this place. Every farmer for 100 miles was listening to Dale Abernathy. Who was she to think she knew better? She was just a girl, an orphan with a dying farm. She looks at the sack of lavender. Her whole summer is in that sack, her hope, her one crazy idea, and he was calling it a weed, a hobby. Have you ever had that moment? When someone you respect, someone who genuinely means well, tells you that your dream is a mistake. Not out of malice, but out of a deep, honest belief that they are saving you from yourself. It's a terrible kind of poison, because you can't fight it with anger. You can't argue against kindness. All you can do is walk away and prove them wrong over decades. Tell me in the comments if you've ever had to walk away from a kind no. Because what Alara did next is for everyone who has. She stood up. She took her sack of lavender. She looked Dale Abernathy in the eye, and she said 2 words. "Thank you." And she walked out. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. Not yet. She walked out into the autumn sunshine, past the massive grain silos, past the trucks lined up to unload their wheat, past the world that Dale Abernathy understood, and she drove home, to her world, the one she was going to have to build herself. Because the front door had just been closed, locked, and the only way forward was to build her own house, from the ground up. She got back to the farm. The silence was heavy. The house felt empty without her father. She walked into the barn, the scent of old hay and engine grease. Her father's tools hung on the walls, cleaned, organized, ready for work he would never do again. She sat on a hay bale, and she finally let herself cry. She cried for her father. She cried for the farm. She cried for the crushing certainty in Dale Abernathy's kind eyes. He had sounded so reasonable, so logical. And that was the most heartbreaking part. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was a fool. A 24-year-old girl playing with flowers while her legacy crumbled around her. She heard a noise. An old pickup truck rattling up the gravel driveway. It was her neighbor, Silas Blackwood, an old man who had known her grandfather. He was small and wiry. His hands were leather. He had stopped by every few days since her father passed, just to check in. He never stayed long. He never offered pity. He just showed up. He walked into the barn, saw her face, saw the burlap sack. He didn't ask what happened. He knew. He sat down on another hay bale. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The barn was filled with the sound of evening birds and the quiet hum of grief. Finally, Silas spoke. His voice was rough, like gravel. Co-op said no. It wasn't a question. Alara just nodded. Said it was a weed, she whispered. Said I should plow it under. Silas picked up a handful of lavender from her sack. He rolled it in his palm. He brought it to his nose. He looked at it. Really looked at it. He looked at the color, the shape of the buds. He closed his eyes. This ain't a weed, he said. This is a promise. Alara looked up. What do you mean? Your grandmother, he said. She planted a hedge of this stuff by the back porch, right after they built the house. Said it kept the moths out of the linens. Said the smell reminded her of home, somewhere back in the old country. He opened his eyes. He looked at Alara. Abernathy is a good man, but he's a wheat man, a grass seed man. His nose only smells dollars per bushel. He can't smell this. He can't smell what's different. Alara felt a tiny flicker of something. Not hope, not yet, but something less heavy than despair. But he's right, she said. Who will buy it? How do I sell it? Silas stood up. He walked over to a dusty corner of the barn. He pulled a tarp off a strange-looking machine. It was a mess of copper pipes and a big round belly. A relic. What is that? Alara asked. Your great-grandfather's still, Silas said. He wasn't much of a farmer at first, but he was a genius with fruit. Made brandies, apple, pear, the best in the valley. This is how he made his first real money, the money he used to buy the seed for his first wheat crop. He looked at her. The co-op don't own the steam, Alara. They don't own the heat. They don't own the water. You don't need them to process this. You just need fire and patience. He tapped the copper pot. The process is the same. Flowers, fruit, it doesn't matter. You're not selling flowers. You're selling what's inside them. You're selling the oil. And that was the moment, the pivot, the quiet decision in a dusty barn that changed everything. The gatekeeper had said no to the flower, so she would sell the soul of the flower instead. The next day, she and Silas started cleaning the still. It was a long, slow process, decades of grime and neglect. They took it apart piece by piece, polished the copper until it shone like a new penny. Silas taught her how it worked. The science was simple, elegant. Steam passes through the lavender. It ruptures the tiny oil sacs on the buds. The steam, now carrying the essential oil, rises. It travels through a pipe cooled by water. The steam condenses back into liquid, a mixture of floral water and pure essential oil. The oil, being lighter, floats on top, ready to be skimmed off. It took them a week to get it working. Her first run was a disaster. She used too much heat, scorched the lavender. The barn filled with an acrid, smoky smell. The oil was brown and useless. She wanted to quit. Silas wouldn't let her. He just said, "Again. Try again." The second run was better. The third was better still. By the 10th run, she understood. She had developed a feel for it. She knew the sound of the right simmer, the smell of the steam just before the oil came through. She harvested the rest of her 20 acres, working from dawn until her hands were raw. She distilled every last stem. The barn filled with a scent so pure, so concentrated, it was intoxicating. By the end of the season, she had 5 gallons of essential oil. It sat in glass jugs, glowing like liquid amber. She had spent all her money on the lavender starts. She had nothing left for bottles, for labels, for marketing. She had the product, but she still had no market. She went back to her list of soap makers and herbalists. She typed out a letter on her father's old Royal typewriter. She offered them not dried lavender buds, but pure, farm-distilled essential oil. She sent out 20 letters, each with a tiny vial, a single drop of oil on a cotton ball, as a sample. Then she waited. For a week, nothing. The silence from the mailbox was as loud as Dale Abernathy's certainty. She started to think he was right. She had turned her crop into a different kind of unsellable product. Then, a letter came. From a small soap maker in California. A check was inside, for $100, an order for a pint of oil. The next day, 2 more letters. The day after that, a phone call. It wasn't a flood, it was a trickle. But it was enough. By Christmas, she had sold all 5 gallons. She had made $3,000. It wasn't enough to pay the bank, not even close, but it was a start. It was proof. Proof that the weed had value. Proof that Dale Abernathy was wrong. She took the money. She didn't buy Christmas presents. She didn't fix the leaky roof. She drove to the bank. She walked up to the loan officer's desk, and she made a payment. It was a small payment, a gesture, but it said something. It said, "I'm still here." It said, "I'm not done yet." And that is how the next 40 years began. Not with a bang, but with the quiet, determined act of paying a small piece of a very large bill. Let me tell you about the next few years. They were hard, so hard. Every dollar she made went back into the farm. She lived on canned vegetables from her garden, on eggs from her chickens. She mended her own clothes. She learned to weld to fix the ancient tractor her father had left her. She did the work of 3 people, 1 arm, 1 woman. She had no help, except for Silas. He would show up with a hot meal, or a part for the tractor he'd found at the scrapyard. He never took money. He just said, "Your father would have done the same for me." The community was split. Some of the old-timers like Silas respected her grit. They saw her father in her. They would stop by, offer a quiet word of encouragement. But others, most of them, sided with Dale Abernathy. They saw her lavender fields as a folly, an indulgence. They'd talk at the diner, at the feed store. Shame what happened to that Finch girl. Her father worked his whole life to build that place. She's running it into the ground with those damn flowers. She heard the whispers. She felt the stares when she went into town. It was a lonely fight. Proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind is the loneliest fight there is, because they don't see you as an opponent. They see you as a project, a charity case, a problem to be solved. Dale Abernathy would see her at the store. He was always polite, always asked how she was doing. "How's the garden coming along, Ilara?" he'd ask. The word garden was a small, sharp jab, a reminder that he didn't see her as a real farmer. "Fine, Dale," she'd say, "just fine," and she'd walk away. Her quiet dignity was her only shield, because this is where the story becomes bigger. It stops being about one woman and a field of flowers, and it starts being about a fundamental shift, a new way of thinking. By 1980, she had paid off the first of her father's loans. She cleared 10 more acres of rocks, by hand. She planted a new variety of lavender, grosso, higher yield, more camphor, but the soap makers loved it. Cash. By 1985, she was debt-free. The bankers who had looked at her with pity now looked at her with a kind of awe. She bought a neighboring 20-acre parcel that had gone fallow. The owner was a wheat farmer who had gone bust. She paid him his asking price, in cash. She planted Provence, a culinary lavender. She started selling it to restaurants in Portland, a whole new market. By 1990, she had 50 acres in full production. She bought a new, modern stainless steel distillery from Italy. She paid for it in cash. The old copper still from her great-grandfather, she polished it and put it in the new distillery building. A monument, a reminder. The steam is yours. Dale Abernathy watched all of this. He drove past her farm on his way to the co-op. First, he saw the small, tidy rows of purple. He shook his head. Then, years later, he saw the new fields, the new distillery building, the clean, new trucks being loaded with boxes. He didn't shake his head anymore. He just drove a little faster. A quiet confusion was growing in him. He had been so sure, so certain. Contrast math tells the story. The average co-op wheat farmer in 1990 was grossing $300 an acre. After seed, fertilizer, fuel, and equipment loans, they were lucky to net $50 an acre. Many were losing money, buried in debt. Ilara Finch, on her hobby farm, was grossing $4,000 an acre. Her input costs were a fraction of theirs. No heavy machinery, no chemical fertilizers. The lavender thrived on neglect. Her net was over $3,000 an acre. All of it was hers. No bank, no co-op, no asking permission. Self-sufficiency as the ultimate form of freedom. She started getting noticed. An article in a farming magazine, a segment on a local news show. She was portrayed as an oddity. The Lavender Lady. A quaint, quirky success story. They missed the point. They saw the flowers. They didn't see the steel. They didn't see the business acumen. They didn't see the woman who had stared down a system that was designed to crush people like her, and won. Not by fighting it, but by making it irrelevant. And then the French arrived. It started with a letter. In the early 2000s, from a small perfume house in Grasse. They had gotten one of her samples from a specialty supplier. They were intrigued. They asked for a larger sample, an ounce of her finest oil, from her oldest plants. A variety she had cultivated herself, a cross between Munstead and something wild she'd found growing by the river. She called it Solitude. She sent the sample, and waited. She didn't know it, but that little vial caused a quiet earthquake in a French laboratory. They had never seen an oil profile like it. It had the sweetness of high-altitude French lavender, but with a clean, almost citrusy note. It was unique, unrepeatable. The terroir of her farm, the volcanic soil, the Oregon rain was in every drop. They sent a man to see her, a buyer. He wore a suit that cost more than her truck. He walked through her fields. He crumbled the buds in his hands. He inspected her distillery. He was polite, reserved. She thought he was unimpressed. They sat at her kitchen table, the same table where she had sat with the bank loan documents years ago. The buyer opened his briefcase. He offered her a contract. He wanted to buy her entire production of Solitude oil for the next 10 years. He named a price, per pound. It was a number so high, Alara thought she had misheard him. It was more than 10 times what she was getting from the soap makers. It was life-altering money. It was generational money. She looked at the contract. She looked at the man in the expensive suit. She thought of Dale Abernathy. She thought of the whispers in the diner. She thought of the word weed. And she smiled. A small, slow smile. She pushed the contract back across the table. "The price is fair," she said, "but I don't sign 10-year contracts." The buyer looked confused. "But this is security. This is a guarantee." She shook her head. "My guarantee is in the soil," she said, "not on a piece of paper. You can have this year's harvest. If you like it, you can come back next year, and we can talk again." The buyer was stunned. No one had ever said no to their offer. He saw something in her eyes, something that wasn't for sale. Control, independence. He nodded slowly. He understood. He was not dealing with a simple farmer. He was dealing with a queen in her own kingdom. A kingdom she had built with her own 2 hands, on land everyone else had called worthless. What happened next changed everything. That contract became the foundation of an empire. A quiet, purple empire in the Oregon hills. The French perfume house didn't just come back the next year. They featured her oil as the signature note in a new perfume. It was a massive success. They marketed it with the story of her farm, Finch Hollow Lavender. Suddenly, her little farm was famous. Other perfume houses came calling, from Paris, from New York, from Tokyo. She never signed an exclusive contract. She sold to everyone. Her price was her price. They paid it, gladly. She expanded, carefully, slowly. She bought more land, always with cash. She hired a team, young people from the valley who couldn't find work on the struggling commodity farms. She taught them everything she knew. She paid them well. She gave them a share of the profits. She was building something more than a business. She was building a community, a different kind of agriculture, one based on quality, not quantity, on value, not volume. And the whole time, the witness watched. Dale Abernathy was retired now. He'd had a good career. He had helped a lot of people. He was respected. But there was a small, persistent burr in his legacy. the Finch girl. He saw her trucks on the road now, big, new, clean trucks, not hauling grain to the co-op, but hauling fragrant boxes to the airport, destined for France. He read about her in the paper. Oregon farmer revolutionizes perfume industry. His wife bought the perfume. It sat on her dresser. The whole house smelled of it, the smell of his one great mistake. He saw the kids he used to coach in Little League now working for her, driving her tractors, managing her distillery. They had good jobs, futures, in a valley where futures were getting harder to find. His certainty had curdled into a quiet, gnawing doubt. He had been so sure he was protecting her. But what if he had been trying to put her in a box labeled wheat or grass seed, a box she was never meant to be in? The reckoning came in 2018, not with a fight, but with a request. The Willamette Valley Farmers Co-op was in trouble, deep trouble. Commodity prices had been flat for a decade. Fuel costs were soaring. Their members were aging. Their kids were leaving for the city. The whole model was breaking. The new manager of the co-op was Dale Abernathy's son, Frank. Frank was a good man, like his father, but he was pragmatic. He saw the writing on the wall. He knew the co-op had to diversify or die. He called a special meeting of the board. He proposed a new specialty crops division for things like wine grapes, hops, and essential oils. He put up a slide, a projection of potential revenue. The numbers were based on the only successful model they had, Finch Hollow Farm. The board was skeptical. "It's a niche market," one said. "It's a woman's hobby," said another, an old-timer. Frank knew he needed more. He needed a partner. He needed Elara Finch. He drove out to her farm. He was nervous. He had grown up hearing the story of his father and the Lavender lady. It was a family legend, a cautionary tale about... Well, he wasn't sure what it was a tale about anymore. He found Elara in one of her greenhouses. She was in her late 60s now. Her hair was silver. Her hands were still the hands of a farmer. She was tending to thousands of tiny lavender starts. She looked up when he approached. She knew who he was. He looked just like his father. "Frank Abernathy," she said. It was a statement, not a question. He explained why he was there. He told her about the co-op's troubles, about his plan for a new division. He was honest. He was humble. "We were wrong," he said. "My father, we were all wrong. We didn't see it. You did." He laid out his proposal. He wanted Finch Hollow Farm to be the anchor of the new division. He wanted her to teach other farmers how to grow lavender. The co-op would handle the marketing, the sales, the distribution. They would offer her a premium, a leadership role, a seat on the board. It was a good offer, a smart offer, a desperate offer. Elara listened. She didn't interrupt. She just kept tending her seedlings. When he was done, the greenhouse was silent, just the sound of his breathing and the rustle of her hands in the soil. She finished with a tray of seedlings. She wiped her hands on her jeans. She turned to him. She didn't look angry. She didn't look triumphant. She looked tired, a deep, soul-level tired, the kind that comes from fighting a quiet war for 40 years. "Let me show you something," she said. She led him out of the greenhouse, across the yard to her office. It was a clean, modern room. One wall was covered in awards: Agricultural Innovator of the Year, Small Business Exporter of the Year. But she didn't point to those. She went to a simple wooden frame on the wall behind her desk. Inside the frame was a single piece of paper, yellowed, brittle. The typewritten words faded but still legible. It was the letter, the rejection letter from his father, dated October 12, 1978. Frank read the words. We do not consider this a viable agricultural product. Recommend you plow it under for your own financial protection." He felt a flush of shame so profound it was dizzying. He looked at Alara. She was just watching him. Her expression was unreadable. "Your father was a good man, Frank," she said. "He genuinely believed he was helping me. He thought he was protecting me from failure, but he wasn't." She tapped the glass over the letter. "He was protecting the co-op from change. He was protecting a system that was already dying. He just couldn't see it yet." She turned away from the letter. She looked out the window at her fields, purple all the way to the horizon. "You're asking me to come back and save the institution that told me my life's work was a weed. You're asking me to teach my methods to the same people who whispered about me in the diner for 20 years. Frank felt something he couldn't quite name. It was the weight of an injustice he had not committed, but had inherited. He could only say one thing: "Yes, I guess I am." Ilara was silent for a long time. Frank thought she was going to tell him to leave. He deserved it. But then she spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of 4 decades. "I will not join your co-op," she said. "Finch Hollow will always be independent. That is not negotiable." Frank's heart sank. "But," she continued, "I will help you. I will create a program. I will teach any farmer who wants to learn. I will share my planting stock. I will even help you build your own distillery. But it will be a separate entity, a new cooperative, for specialty growers, and you will all run it together, as equals." Frank couldn't believe what he was hearing. It was more than he had dared to hope for. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you do that, after everything?" Ilara looked at him, and for the first time, he saw a hint of a smile in her eyes. "Because my father loved this valley," she said. "And because Silas Blackwood once told me that your neighbor's success doesn't diminish your own. And because it's time for a new story. That's the legacy. It's not the money. It's not the fame. It's the ripple effect." Ilara Finch didn't just build a farm. She built a new economy for her valley. The Finch Hollow method, as it came to be known, saved dozens of small farms from extinction. She created the Willamette Specialty Growers Alliance. They now grow not just lavender, but mint, chamomile, calendula, saffron. High-value crops for global markets. The old co-op still exists, but it's smaller now, a shadow of its former self, a relic of a different time. Dale Abernathy passed away in 2020. At his funeral, the church was filled with flowers, not roses or carnations, but huge, fragrant bouquets of lavender, from every farm in the Alliance, a gesture of respect, and a quiet statement. Ilara still lives on the farm. She walks the fields every morning. She knows the scent of every plant. The old copper still sits in the main lobby of the Alliance Distillery, a physical artifact, a reminder that sometimes the most radical act is to ignore the kind, sensible, well-meaning advice of people who are certain they know what's best for you. It's a reminder that the steam is always yours. Right now, somewhere in the world, a young woman is sitting in an office, across from a man who is telling her, with kindness and concern, that her idea is a dead end, that she should stick to what works, that he is only trying to protect her. This story is for her. It's proof that the most dangerous limitation is the one imposed by someone who genuinely believes they are helping. It cannot be fought with anger. It can only be disproven with decades of quiet, relentless, beautiful work. If this story means something to you, if you've ever been that person in that chair, share this with someone else who needs to hear it. Someone who needs to be reminded that their weed might just be a flower the world hasn't learned to value yet. Subscribe for more stories of quiet rebellion and earned triumph. And tell us in the comments, what is the lavender in your life? What is the thing you believe in, even when no one else does? We want to hear it, because your story matters, and the world needs more weeds.